Hey, Wellness Warriors, welcome to the Burnout Resolution Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mylaine Riobé, and today we're going to tackle burnout as a spiritual wake-up call. Some people might consider this a radical concept, although I don't. Spirituality has been around for probably tens of thousands of years, and as far as we know, at least several thousand years, just based on archaeological data. And for me personally, having corroborated what many ancient traditions have to say with modern studies, in my personal opinion, I also think that what ancient traditions have to say about spirituality is probably quite valid as well. So I wanted to dive into that today. Burnout isn't just about stress. It's not just mental. It's not even just physical. It's all of it and spiritual as well. It's your soul knocking on your heart, asking you to wake up. We'll look at what science and spirituality have to say about intuition, our heart, and consciousness. I'll share a couple personal stories about why I believe in intuition and how science is showing us that it's actually a real thing. So in many ways, burnout is actually a gift. It's a gift that your body sends you to help you transcend the chaos of physical reality so that you can see things from a higher or different perspective. Burnout is your body's wisdom. The body is a very small piece of the soul or the spirit. It's often said that we are spiritual beings having a human experience in a human body. And so our bodies are this tiny little piece of who we actually are. And because we're so focused on the physical aspect of the body, sometimes we lose perspective and think that's all we are. So when we hyper focus on just the body and pure survival, we inevitably will burn out, because burnout is a sign that you're not replenishing yourself in some form or fashion and that your metabolism is either stuck or depleted. If we are not looking from that higher perspective and realizing that we're more than just a body, we cut off that replenishment and inevitably end up in burnout. Your body has this spectacular way that it will continuously remind you that something is off, that you're off your path or off of the blueprint that it's designed to follow. These are what we recognize as symptoms. And it's a miracle when we look at how the cells of the human body actually work together. How do they know? How does a liver cell know it's a liver cell and not a heart cell when it has the genetic code of the entire body in it? So there's something miraculous about the human body where it's self-aware in many ways. We don't quite know scientifically how that is. We don't have the chemistry to explain it. We don't have the biology to explain it. We have to start drilling down into the quantum level to really begin to piece together how the human body actually functions in the world. When we start drilling down into the quantum level, we start scratching the surface of spirituality. When we rely only on logic, which is what the biology tells us, the chemistry tells us, when we start relying just on that, we run into trouble because quantum physics is very different than biology and chemistry. When we start going into the quantum realm, the biology and the chemistry starts to not make a lot of sense anymore, which is mind-blowing. When we start to really drill deep down into the body at the level of the cells, there are certain functions inside the human body, inside of its cells, that are not explainable by biology, chemistry, or any known science that we currently have. They're only beginning to be explained through quantum physics. Quantum physics is that weird, spooky science that nobody quite understands. In fact, Niels Bohr made a comment, something to the effect of, if quantum physics or quantum mechanics has not completely shocked you, you don't understand it. And it's so true. Every time we start drilling into quantum physics, we get more and more confused. But the funny thing about quantum physics is it actually works and it functions. Our cell phones actually run on quantum physics. Now we have quantum computers that can do a near infinite number of calculations at the same time to get us answers a lot faster. Not just AI, but actual quantum computing is a whole other level of computer technology that we're just scratching the surface about. The sense of smell in the human body is thought to be a quantum function and not just a biological or chemical function. Quantum physics is this weird kind of almost nebulous science where the observer becomes very important. Whether or not something collapses into being has to do with whether or not it's being observed, whether something has focused on it. Before something focuses on it, it's just this endless wave of possibility. Even electrons and photons and the components of the atoms that we know make up physical matter are essentially probabilities and not actual physical structures. So until something focuses on it to make it into something, it exists as almost anything that's possible all at once. And that's really hard to wrap our minds around. And yet we use this science all the time. We use it in outer space to launch rockets. Our cell phones use this technology. We now have computers that use this technology. And the results are repeatable. They're not random results. We know how to get somebody on the moon because of quantum physics. We landed that space probe on the asteroid and got that sample and brought it back to the Earth. That's all based in quantum physics. That level of precision is very possible using quantum physics, and yet we don't understand quantum physics. Quantum physics introduces a concept that we recognize as consciousness. We used to think that consciousness arose from the brain, but now we actually have science to show us that even when there is no brain function, consciousness still exists. In fact, even when there's no heartbeat, consciousness still exists. We have scientific data now, repeatable scientific data, to show us that this is in fact a thing. Consciousness is there before physical matter is there. When we talk about the observer in quantum physics, we're talking about consciousness. Princeton University has done a mind-blowing experiment using random number generators in, I think, 139 different labs throughout the world. What it's been able to show with over 20 years, maybe even 30 years worth of research, is that random number generators are sometimes not random. Not only are they sometimes not random, and they have the same numbers replicating in huge spikes, but they tend to correlate with events and things that go on in the world. Princeton University stated that September 11th of 2001 was the largest non-random spike that they had ever seen in their random number generators in all the years since they've been doing this experiment, where they had this enormous non-random spike in the random number generators that occurred 4 hours before the event of 9/11. And this has been replicated with other world events. For example, the election of President Obama was one such non-random spike. And there have been other non-random spikes. So you can take a look at that study at Princeton University. It's available online. And it's pretty mind-blowing how there appears to be a collective consciousness that exists beyond space and time, where we have a sense of what's happening, even when our brain doesn't know it yet. The Institute of HeartMath and other academic institutions and science institutions have done research on what they call coherence. People who are in high coherence can predict events multiple seconds before they actually occur. And so these experiments show us that there's something beyond the human body that is not limited to space and time, where we already know what's about to happen before it actually happens. A lot of moms have this intuition where they're thinking of their child and suddenly their child calls them. Or you're thinking of someone and suddenly they text you. Millions of people have had that experience, and that is intuition. You know ahead of time that something's about to happen. Science is beginning to show us that time isn't quite as linear as we think. Quantum physics is showing us that quantum particles like photons exist in the past, present, and future all at the same time. Even though in physical reality, we perceive time to be going in just one direction, in reality, time is not just linear. And so science tells us, and mathematics also tells us, that we can be aware of past and future events simultaneously. And the Institute of HeartMath and other academic institutions showing us this with the science and with the math is corroborating what ancient traditions and ancient spiritual teachings have taught us for thousands of years. So there is a science to intuition. Intuition is something that you cultivate. And the biggest barrier to cultivating intuition is being in your own head and using your brain too much. And this is where coherence comes in. Intuition resides in the heart. This is how The principle even got the name HeartMath. The cells in the human heart that form what we call the heart brain are little tiny brain cells that actually live in the human heart that are known to think independently from the brain that lives in the head. The brain in the human heart appears to be independent of space and time and not confined to it, whereas the brain in the head is confined by space and time. And so this is why our brain, the head brain, uses a lot of logic. Things have to, quote unquote, make sense to your brain, but not so much to your heart. There's no logical thing in the human brain that can explain how you can have an intuition about someone and they text you after that, because the human brain works in linear fashion. In other words, this happens first and then this happens. There's no logic in your brain that will explain why you think of someone first, then they text you. To your brain, it should be that they text you first, then you think of them in response to the text because it's linear. But that's not what happens to people. Those types of computations actually occur in the human heart. There's an electromagnetic field in the human heart that has been detected that goes well outside of the human body, 8 to 11 feet or more. When this field is optimal, when it's in high coherence, we tend to step out of the linearity of space and time. And this is where our intuition lives. This is how we can think of someone and then suddenly they text. This is how we can have an intuition about a world event that's about to happen, and then it happened, as the Princeton University studies seem to suggest. There's this idea of a dual process. There's a brain in the head, there's a brain in the heart. A 2008 study by Daniel Kahneman described the brain as slow and deliberate, intuition as fast, holistic, and unconscious, or subconscious, I guess we could say. Another scientist called Gary Klein concluded that emergency workers, such as firefighters and doctors, rely on pattern recognition and intuition to save lives. A hypothesis put forth in 1996 by Antonio Damasio called the somatic marker hypothesis states that the body signals decisions before the brain registers them. And that's been duplicated in multiple studies where your body already knows something before your brain figures it out. Science is proving what wisdom traditions have told us for thousands of years. Intuition is real, it's measurable, and it's essential. If we're too much in our head, we move too slowly, and we've all talked ourselves out of doing things that our intuition has told us to do, right? By thinking too hard about it. Years ago, when I was training, I had a client who came into our clinic, super sweet 42-year-old female who was a dialysis patient, and she had huge fibroids and was extremely anemic from her fibroids. She was experiencing dizziness, palpitations, and given that her kidneys weren't working very well, that was a very dangerous place for her to be. We recommended to her that she have a hysterectomy. Her fibroids were too large to manage in any other way. So we prepped her for surgery, we optimized her for surgery, and she had a flawless hysterectomy. She had a couple minor hiccups recovering. Dialysis patients often have a very weak immune system, and so she had a little bit of an infection in her incision, developed a fever, and so we managed that, and she recovered from that. And so she was without a fever for over 2 days, and every indication was that she was ready to go home. But something told me to hold on to her until the afternoon. So that morning I was making my rounds, and something just told me, do not send her home. Keep her until the afternoon. I told her, you know what, you're ready to go home, but let's just keep you to this afternoon, and then we'll get you home this evening. And she agreed. At 2 p.m. that afternoon, I got a page that she was hemorrhaging in the bathroom. So I ran up to her floor and into her room, and she was bleeding out of the blue. We ended up stabilizing her, transferring her to the intensive care unit, where she ended up staying for over a week. She ended up being hospitalized for over 30 days. We had to give her over 30 units of blood and 40 units of what we call fresh frozen plasma over that time. Had she gone home that morning, she probably would have died. I don't know why I decided to keep her. I just had this feeling, and it wasn't logical, made no sense. Today, I would have gotten all types of text messages from clinical care coordinators asking me why she was still in the hospital. But I know to this day that had I sent her home, she would not have survived. She ended up recovering, and we did send her home, where she continued to recover and did quite well. That wasn't logic, that was intuition. Now, logic came in when we had to stabilize her and do all the things that we did to save her life, but intuition is why she was still in the hospital where she could get that life-saving care. So I've always felt that intuition was a big part of my life, even as a kid. And so that was a big hint that it was still part of my life as an adult. What does this all have to do with burnout? Aristotle used to talk about something called the ether, and he got that concept from the ancient traditions that he learned from. We took that out from science because we couldn't see it, touch it, smell it, and so we just decided it didn't exist. Well, it's back. Lynn McTaggart has been credited with a concept she calls the field. This has been duplicated in scientific experiment through David Bohm and other scientists. We're beginning to understand what the ancients understood, what they called ether, and that is that space is not empty, space is full. In fact, it's infinitely full. So what Lynn McTaggart is calling the field sounds eerily similar to what we would call consciousness. And then there's the HeartMath research. The electromagnetic field of the human heart is like an antenna and captures data from the field or from consciousness. There are scientific experiments done to show that people that are in low coherence, and low coherence happens when we're frustrated or angry or scared. We get this erratic heart rhythm that alters the electromagnetic field of the human heart, and that causes our vibration, so to speak, to drop. That kind of takes our intuition out of the equation, and then we start relying on the head brain, which again only has a small piece of the picture. Intuition's a much bigger deal than we give it credit for. So when we take intuition out of the picture and we leave everything to our head brain, it goes into these fear loops and it loses its logic. This can cause stress, hence burnout, which can even lead to physical diseases. When the brain is chaotic and not functioning well, it will send stress hormones down into the body, which will alter its metabolism. It will alter its actual function. And this is how burnout takes place. When we are in high coherence or engaging the heart brain through self-care, breath work, positive affirmations, and many other strategies that are known to raise coherence, the brain is not chaotic, and neither is the heart brain chaotic. In fact, the heart brain, the electromagnetic field, gets a lot stronger and can control, if you will, the brain. Remember that your brain relies on data input through your five senses. So the human heart also needs to be there, because if we're just relying on the five senses, we're not going to know everything that's going on around us. So we have to also rely on intuition, which is where the heart brain comes in. The heart brain is essentially the antenna to the field or to consciousness. When that antenna is up and getting the right signals from the field or consciousness or whatever you want to call it, the spirit, the soul, then the brain can function better. And it's not relying just on five senses to try and operate in the world. If you're relying on just your five senses, your brain doesn't understand what's happening right now. We need our intuition for that piece. Because your brain relies on what you hear, what you see, what you smell, what you touch, what you taste, to know what's going on based on memories, it's always in the past, because it has to collect that data first, remember what it means, and then make sense out of it. That means it's never in the present. And this is where your heart comes in. Your heart is always in the present. The more that you're in high coherence, the more perceptive it is. And it's the coherence between the heart and the brain. That's where the magic happens. Burnout is essentially if you're cutting off the heart and not allowing it to command the brain. When you're cutting off the antenna to consciousness or spirit or soul, this is where burnout can take place. Real life examples of that are you're in a job you don't like, or you're in a relationship you don't like, or you have circumstances that are not ideal going on around you, or you feel powerless to change them. Very often, if you're in a job you don't like, or something's going wrong with your career, or you have other stressors, it's hard to know, like, how do I get myself out of this? How do I break the cycle? And very often we keep suppressing our intuition and falling back into our heads, trying to logically figure out how to find another job or do whatever you think the fix is. The ultimate fix is to engage the heart so that you have your antenna out there communicating with your soul and spirit. The soul is not confined to space and time. Consciousness is not confined to space and time. Again, we don't even need the body to be alive for consciousness to exist, right? That's what studies are beginning to show. There are studies on people who are in full cardiac arrest. When they're resuscitated, they can verbalize things that they were clinically dead while those things were happening. So they can remember conversations that took place when they were clinically dead. They can remember being in certain places and situations when they were clinically dead. And so this is being corroborated by multiple studies all around the world now and simply cannot be denied. So the human heart is more than just a pump that pumps blood around. And yes, that's important, but it carries something else. It carries consciousness. It carries we don't know what they are. We don't know necessarily what the waves are or how the electromagnetic field of the human heart engages with the spirit or consciousness to transmit the data that comes into the brain, but it does it somehow, right? Albert Einstein famously talked about this when he came up with his E=mc². He said he was sitting on a bus and it just downloaded into his head. He then had the idea and he went out and worked the math. So he engaged his brain after he got the intuitive hit. He had this perfect way of using his intuition to come up with ideas and the theories, and then he would work them out logically with the math. A lot of his principles are still valid to this day and form the very foundation of our science. These studies on these near-death experiences, right? Or I don't even know if we can call them near-death if they were in actual cardiac arrest, right? But they've been published in medical journals. So The Lancet, which is a peer-reviewed medical journal, published one such study in 2001. What these studies suggest is that the human body is the receiver of consciousness, and that consciousness does not originate in the human body, which makes sense spiritually, right? The human body is just a teeny weeny piece of the soul. And so it makes perfect sense in the spiritual world as well as in the scientific world. Where does intuition come in with business success and, life success as we might define it? A paper published by the Harvard Business Review in 2010 stated that business executives use intuition to make high-stakes business decisions as much as they use data. The Journal of Management Development published a paper in 2014 stating that leaders who integrate their intuition and logic are more effective and innovative. And I love this one. The University of London published a paper in 2016 stating that trusting your intuition correlates with higher well-being and life satisfaction. This is what we like to hear in burnout conversations. Using your intuition, engaging your heart in your entire life, not just your career, gets you out of burnout. When you engage your heart, you begin to engage in self-care, because that's the inevitable conclusion. When we sit still enough and we allow the heart to speak, we inevitably begin to understand that, yeah, I gotta take care of me first before I can take care of anyone else. We hear this on airplanes all the time. Put your own oxygen mask on before you help children. If you're busy passing out, nobody's going to be there to put the oxygen mask on your child. This is a life lesson, not just a lesson we learn on airplanes. So the conclusion, based on all these studies, is that the most successful and fulfilled people use their intuition and don't suppress it. In fact, they cultivate it. And we'll talk about how to do that later in the podcast. Let's talk about lifestyle as a foundation for intuition. Because if the human body is not in a healthy space, it's very difficult to cultivate intuition. We have to get both aspects up and running for the human body and the spirit, the mind and the body to function together to get out of burnout for good. REM sleep boosts intuition and insight. That was published in Nature magazine in 2004. The microbiome is extremely important for intuition. Also influences mood, decision making, and many, many, many other body functions, as we've talked about multiple times on this podcast. Some of these studies were done by Dr. Mayer in 2015. Exercise enhances neuroplasticity, in other words, helps to change your brain structure and physiology and the structure and physiology of your entire nervous system, as well as enhancing intuition. This was a study by Cultivating and Kramer in 2003. And stress recovery, done by the Institute of HeartMath, Dr. McCready, in 2009, showed that coherence practices lower cortisol and improve heart rate variability. So what are coherence practices? Breathwork, how you breathe, determines whether or not your heart brain or your heart's electromagnetic field fully engaged with the field or consciousness or your soul or spirit, however you want to call it. So every breath you take, you're either putting the antenna up or you're shutting it down. When the antenna's up, your intuition is high. When your antenna's down, you're relying on your head too much. So lifestyle is not just about your physical health. It's a whole mind, body, spirit thing. So let's talk about another controversial thing, synchronicities. Those coincidences, things that we would attribute to just some weird coincidence that might happen. You might see a set of numbers that keep repeating, or you might see the same person over and over again that you barely know. There's lots of different examples of synchronicities. Carl Jung called them evidence of an underlying connection between the inner state and outer events. I think of synchronicities like breadcrumbs. They show you if you're on the right path, listening to your intuition. You don't get the whole map, right? Intuition doesn't just give you this whole roadmap of your entire life. It just gives you the next thing. Hey, I think I should turn left at this corner instead of right. Or I think I should take the bus today instead of walking. That's an intuitive hit. Sometimes that intuition comes with a feeling, some type of engagement of a feeling with that thought that just pops into your mind. You don't get the whole map, you just get the next step. They're reminding you, hey, stay awake, don't live life on autopilot or you'll miss the intuitive hits. They're not instructions to follow blindly, they're signals to be fully engaged in your life. Being still cultivates intuition. Being still while you breathe is extremely important. So every breath you take, you're either engaging or you're not engaging, right? If you take a shallow breath, say you're busy doing something and you're not thinking about your breathing, you're just shallow breathing or you're holding your breath. I'll catch myself doing this too. Like you're so busy doing something and next thing you know, you're like, wait, I haven't taken a breath in like 30 seconds. Let me take a breath. It happens to all of us, right? We don't have to breathe perfectly all day, but we do need to be prompted to be still occasionally throughout the day. The Institute of HeartMath recommends 3 times a day for 3 minutes, where we sit and take some nice, deep, slow breaths. Again, through the nostril, not through the mouth, and not holding your breath. So you want to take a nice 5-second inhale. You don't want to hear the air moving through your nostrils. It's just very slow 5 seconds in, very slow 5 seconds back out, again through your nostrils. That immediately engages the heart's electromagnetic field, which then immediately prompts your brain to relax. And then the brain sends down all of the calming neurotransmitters and hormones for what we call the parasympathetic side of the nervous system. The sympathetic side's the opposite. So when we're holding our breath or we're taking shallow breaths, that's what we're engaging the brain to do, because the electromagnetic field of the heart or the heart brain is not fully engaged. In that case, your brain is going to send down the stress hormones instead of the feel-good, happy hormones. Make sure you focus 3 times a day on your breathing. And also engage your feelings when you breathe. Think of things that make you happy. So if you're in a job that you don't like, for example, think of being in the one you do like. Think of, just make one up, right? What would I be doing if there were no restrictions to what I could be doing right now? What would I be doing instead? If it's being on a beach, walking through the forest, hanging out with friends or someone you love, whatever it would be. If I were doing what I want to do right here, right now, and if there were no restrictions, what would I be doing? So that's a way to engage your intuition. Your intuition knows how to get you where you want to be. Your brain doesn't without the intuition guiding it. Because your intuition is not confined by space and time, it already knows your future, so to speak. If you let it keep guiding you, it'll keep giving you breadcrumbs with ideas and the next step and the next step. You have to keep engaging it and be as present as you can be in your life. That means fully engaged with your emotions, fully engaged with your experiences, even your 5 senses, right? You don't want to ignore your 5 senses and just use intuition. They need to be flawlessly moving together. It's the coherence between the heart and the brain. That's the magic. It's not shutting the brain completely off and ignoring your 5 senses. It's merging the two together so that intuition is leading your brain. So you're fully present and engaged as much as you can be throughout the day. Burnout numbs us to our intuition, and it just fuels the fire, because when you're burnt out, you tend to try to engage your brain and try and logically get yourself out of the burnout. But unless you engage your intuition that already knows how to get you out of that burnout, you're going to stay trapped. So engage your intuition in order to get these little invitations that will keep reminding you that you're on the right path and that you're taking the correct next step. Engaging with your feelings is extremely important, because that tells you if you're listening to intuition or if your brain took over. It's trying to trick you, right? They're not always aligned and moving down the same path. When your brain starts to feel like it's not in control anymore, it rebels a little bit. So you want to be very mindful of whether or not you're listening to intuition or if your brain took over. That's where your feelings come in. And also timing, right? When you think of something, the first feeling that you get is usually your intuition. And then the subsequent feelings are usually your brain. Because remember, your intuition is fast, whereas logic is slow. If you're really fully present and you get a thought that comes into your head, the very first feeling is going to tell you whether you're on the right path or whether your brain is in fear. So if you feel good about thinking about something, and then all of a sudden you don't feel so great about it, intuition told you, yeah, go for it. And then your brain is trying to stop you. Those are very subtle signs that you cultivate. This is why intuition is something that you cultivate, and it's not necessarily something that just comes to you out of the blue. Although sometimes it does. But being still is the way to cultivate it. So making sure that you take 3 minutes 3 times a day at bare minimum to just be with yourself, to just breathe, and to think of things that bring you joy. And if you can't think of anything that brings you joy right away, just think about the air moving through your nostrils. And just keep refocusing on the air moving in and out of your lungs so that your brain doesn't take over and take you somewhere you don't want to be. As you continue to do that, as you practice, you will start to feel the heart being more engaged. And you'll feel your brain stepping back a bit more and allowing the heart to lead. This is what we call heart-centered living. Burnout is essentially unengaged intuition, overthinking with the head brain, and not having the proper coherence between the two. That translates into physical symptoms: exhaustion, brain fog, stress, anxiety, palpitations, sleep disturbances, gastrointestinal symptoms. When you're out of coherence and the brain is sending down all those stress responses, it's going to hijack your body into fight or flight reactions and essentially suppress other body functions that are not essential for fight or flight. So your thyroid's going to get suppressed, your immune system will be suppressed, your musculoskeletal system even gets suppressed, especially the muscles that use oxygen, because we don't use oxygen during fight or flight. A good bit of your muscle fibers require oxygen, so they're what we call the white fibers instead of the red fibers that don't require oxygen. So those white fibers get suppressed, your gut gets suppressed, parts of your brain even get suppressed. So the parts of your brain that are responsible for executive functioning and memory, they're not important for survival, so they get suppressed too. When you're in fight or flight, you don't have your intuition engaged, or you're not in high coherence. That means a good portion of your body is being suppressed and not functioning well. This is what leads us down this slippery slope to burnout. So recovering from burnout includes getting your mind in the game, right? The mind is the heart. The brain is the head brain. That mind-body connection is really, really important. Mind and brain are not exactly the same thing. So mind is beyond space and time. In traditional Chinese medicine, they teach us that the heart is the commander of the body, and they distinguish the mind from the brain. So when we say mind-body, we're talking about heart-mind, or intuition and body, or spirituality and body, soul and body. Making sure that you're maintaining that is a huge part of burnout recovery. In addition to making those lifestyle changes, the 4 pillars of wellness, right? So eat, move, rest, and detox. Knowing your dynamic metabolic type, or where your metabolism is stuck, where your body is kind of stuck, helps you to make those lifestyle decisions that boosts your metabolism so you're flowing with your body, not against your body. Is critical for burnout recovery as well. Your soul already knows the way. Intuition already knows the way. Burnout is just the signal telling you that you've strayed away from it. 5 actionable tips to start engaging your intuition today. Number 1, HeartMath breathing. Putting your hand on your heart to remind yourself to be heart focused while you're breathing is a great tip. So remember, 5 seconds in, slow, 5 seconds out, slow, through the nostrils only, and you don't hold your breath at all. Gratitude. No matter how deep into burnout we are, there are always things we can be grateful for. Part of getting out of burnout is finding our blessings. Like, what is it that we're grateful for? Whether it's friends, family, a sunny day, warm weather, a pet, a food you love to eat, your coffee in the morning like me. One of the many things I'm grateful for, right? Whatever it is, write it down in a journal. The act of writing it down is really important. So don't just like whiz through it in your head. Literally write it down physically on something, or even if it's a note on your phone, at least that's a physical thing you're doing to really ingrain that gratitude with your senses. So even if it's just 3 things every single day, sleep. Make sure you protect your sleep. And again, if you know your dynamic metabolic type, that helps you know how much sleep you need. You need anywhere from 7 to 9 hours of sleep, depending on your biological sex and your dynamic metabolic type. Preserving your REM sleep is really important. If you have a wearable, they usually will let you know how much REM sleep you got. Make sure you are protecting your REM sleep because that boosts your intuition. Watch those gut checks. Your body often knows before your brain figures it out. And daily movement. Especially if you're sedentary, doing a desk job for hours and hours, make sure you get up periodically every 90 minutes. Even if it's just a walk around your office, do a couple jumping jacks, stretch out, and if you can, at least 20 minutes of gentle exercise every day, whether it's yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, Pilates, biking, swimming, anything that you love. So remember that burnout is just a signal that you've strayed from your body's natural rhythm and that you're not engaging your intuition as much as you could. It's your body's wisdom. It's your soul's wake-up call to reconnect with the greatest intelligence of life, consciousness, that flows in and through you every moment of the day. When you raise your coherence, you honor your body's natural rhythms, life becomes much more meaningful, and you start to feel better as a sign that you're moving in the right direction. If you're ready to answer your wake-up call, I invite you to join our 7-day Burnout Resolution Challenge. In just 1 week, you'll learn how to reconnect to your intuition, raise your coherence, recharge your energy, and leave burnout in the rearview mirror. So that's all the time we have for today's episode. I hope you found this helpful. If so, please like and subscribe to our channel. Please share this with anyone that you feel would be benefited by it. If you'd like to know more, visit awakenedwellnessnow.com. If you want to know about our corporate programs, I invite you to visit our website as well. If you're not quite sure where to start, take our burnout risk assessment that you can find on our website. Thanks for listening and watching, and until next time, many, many blessings. Thank you.